Hey guys, Jim at JP Property Consulting. So today's question is, some of you are asking yourself, should I hire a property management company to run my property, or should I manage my property myself? And I'm seeing a lot of videos out there talking about this with landlords and giving advice to them. And so before I get into my video, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of understanding of where I'm coming from this, which is going to be a little bit different than most of the other YouTube videos and other instructional videos that you've seen and heard. I have a little bit of a different background than what most of these other video content providers have been. So the way I kind of explain, and I apologize if you've heard this before, just skip through this because I need to admit this is important because I need to kind of analogize this so that I can explain where I'm coming from this. I give the analogy a lot of the car dealership and buying a car, ways to purchase a car, that our industry is a lot similar to that. That when you go purchase a car, there are three primary ways of purchasing a car. And these ways of purchasing a car are kind of similar to the ways that someone could go and rent an apartment, if you will, right? There's that guy that puts his car in the driveway and puts that for sale sign on it, right? That could be maybe kind of compared to that small mom and pop landlord that owns that duplex or that 8-unit apartment building, right? Then we got the guy that he owns Bob's Auto Sales, right? This is that small little 20, 30 car lot, and he's that local guy that owns his own auto dealership or so on. We'll kind of compare that to, let's say, that small property management company, that little mom and pop outfit that manages a few units here and there, okay? So where I come from is I've never put my car in the driveway and put that for sale sign on it. I mean, I've never owned my own duplex or 8-unit apartment building, okay? I've not ever owned Jim's Auto Sales, meaning I don't have a small management company or ever been with a small little outfit like that, okay? Instead, I come from that side of the industry of that Toyota and Chrysler side of the business, okay? This is the big companies, the large organizations, so I come from working at and managing the 400 and 500 unit apartment communities where they've got the swimming pools and the tennis courts and the clubhouse and the staff that work on site and so on. And these big national organizations where we train our leasing agents the right way to do things immediately right away, okay? And my training classes kind of go through and teach small landlords and those small management companies that way of doing things that we do over at that Toyota side of the business, if you will. That said, so coming from that side of the industry, I have a very good sense of understanding who knows what they're doing and who doesn't know what they're doing, because there are things that I will tell you that I see a lot of the guys at the Bob's Auto Sales side of our industry and the small mom and pop guys, that they do certain things that I'm going to frankly tell you that I would get the electric chair over at that Toyota side of stuff if they ever heard or saw me do some of these things. And so those are red flags to me that this guy or this management company really doesn't know what they're doing, or they don't come from, I should say, they don't come from that side of the industry, okay? And so I'm going to kind of come at it from that perspective here and show you that there are things that I would look for if it were me coming from that side of the business. If I was to hire a management company to manage my apartment buildings, if I did own myself, these are things that I would look for them doing and make sure that they're doing these things and they're not doing these other things. So that's what I'm going to kind of go through today. And here's another analogy I use is someone like me doesn't know anything about maintenance or electrical work, right? If I'm going to hire an electrician to do wiring around a house or around a building, I would not really know whether this guy knows what he's talking about or not. It would be tough for me to assess if this electrician knows what he's doing, right? Well, if a lot of these management companies or these guys on YouTube and getting advice to you guys they don't come from that side of the business, it's tough to know whether or not they know what they're doing, right? It's tough if you're that guy that is to electricians like I am, right? You don't know much about property management. Let's say you're a small mom and pop landlord. How would you know whether or not this management company knows what they're doing? Because it's tough for you to assess them and tell whether or not they know what they're doing, right? So I'm going to give you that understanding and that of my background and show you how these are red flags that would come up to me, okay? So first things first. So one of the things, so to give you an understanding, so I use that analogy of these are the kinds of things where I come from, is these big property management companies, these large organizations with the swimming pools and this kind of stuff. These is where I am going to bring this to you from that side of things, okay, if you will. So now, that said, sorry for the long introduction, but so now, after that, so one of the things that I would ask you to do is, as a small landlord, is get to know your state's particular laws. First of all, okay, be familiar with these things, and you can then assess whether or not this management company is doing things in accordance to those laws. Now, 90% of the time, they're going to be doing 75, 80% of the stuff properly, but when in my doing my research, as I'm looking for clientele to send my information to do my training with them, I'm seeing a lot of these small management companies here, for example, in the state where I'm in, we have a law that says that for the application fee, that you can charge the applicant the cost of obtaining the credit report, the consumer credit report, and it has to come directly from one of what they call the big three, meaning like TransUnion, Equifax, or Experian, right? So here in the state where I'm in, they say you can charge them the actual cost of that. But the max that you can charge them is $25. This is in the state where I'm in Wisconsin at this very moment. When I'm making this video, this is what the law says that you can do. So a lot of small outfits misread that and may misconstrue that. And so hearing that the max that you can charge them is 25. Right. Well, a couple things. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll say, well, that means I can charge them a $25 application fee, even though it'll only cost you $12 to get that credit report. And then they think, well, I'm going to charge them for my time to call their employer and their landlord and do all this stuff, right? You cannot be doing that here in Wisconsin. You can only charge them the cost of obtaining the credit report. Some companies use those application processing fee companies like AppFolio or RentPrep or things like that. And they upcharge you. Okay, so that's a third-party reseller. And therefore, now they have a $40 fee to run that person's application, right? Well, in doing so, they think that, well, then I can at least recoup 25 of that. They're misreading that law here in Wisconsin, and that says that they can do that, and they're not knowing that law, okay? And in doing so, they're mischarging them what they should charge if they're charging that $25 application fee, because that's not the cost of obtaining that consumer credit report. You're paying AppFolio to do their landlord verification, do their income verification, do their criminal history, all that stuff, and that's built into that price. The only thing here you can charge it for is the cost of obtaining the consumer credit report. Okay, so again, if they're charging inadequate or improper application fees based on what you are going to learn by looking at your state's laws, right, that's a good red flag that these guys don't know what they're doing. Okay, that's number one. So first and foremost, get to know your laws as far as what your state says you can charge for an application fee. I got a whole list of stuff here, so I'm just going to kind of read off my things so with that there, so some of the things that we're trained to do and not do certain things, and say and not certain things, say certain things at the big companies, the Toyota side of our industry, if you will. Ask them if they've got written screening criteria. Ask them what their screening criteria is, and ask to see it. Okay, so and read through. Hopefully they have this in writing. Okay, they don't necessarily have to, but they should have it in writing, and ask to see it. So now if you were in my shoes, okay, and again, I use that electrician thing. If I'm going to hire an electrician, I don't know what to look for, right? Okay, well, I'm going to teach you guys what to look for in their screening criteria and you can tell whether this is a small company that doesn't know what they're doing. So your screening criteria should be, and I go through this in my application screening, or in my application processing class, I talk about this as well too. But your applicant screening criteria needs to have, there's criteria for your criteria. It needs to have and be certain things. So those certain things, obviously, it needs to be fair. It needs to be consistently applied, right? Okay, those are the things, right? We already know all that. Right? But it also needs to be objective and measurable. So you want to make sure that you're not saying, or that management company that you're vetting is not saying, I don't, if I'm going to hire a management, I don't want to see in your screening criteria things that says something like applicant must have a good credit rating. That would not fly where I come from, at the Toyota side of things. Why not? Because that's not objective or measurable. That screams to me this guy or gal, this management company doesn't know what they're doing, because they would never say that over at that side of the industry, the Toyota Chrysler side of the business where I come from. Here's another analogy I use. You can tell where people come from down south or up north by the accent they use and how they talk, right? Well, I could tell whether you're a mom and pop small landlord or you're a small little outfit management company based on how you talk. I will, and I can tell whether you have someone that maybe works at your organization by the way you speak and talk. So I will look at a website and I'll go through and I'll go, okay, these guys know what they're doing. They've got probably some associates there that come from that Toyota side of the business because they're saying things the right way, okay? On the other hand, I go in and I'll read through management companies' websites and I'll think, okay, they're saying things like must have good credit rating. That's not objective nor measurable. We over at that Toyota side of the business would never say that. We, on the other hand, would say things like must have a credit rating of 650, whatever you set it at. That's objective and that's measurable. Must not have any outstanding debt. That's objective, or must not have more than X amount of outstanding debt. That's objective and measurable. Okay, must not have a bankruptcy within the past so many years. That's measurable. That's objective, right? Having good credit rating is not. So that would scream to me, these guys don't know what they're doing. They're not using objective and measurable screening criteria, which means they could be wishy-washy on their applicant processing procedures, and thus could probably get yourself also into fair housing trouble, and them too. So again, run far away and fast if you see something like that, okay? These are guys and gals that don't know what they're doing, okay? They in the landlord verification or the housing verification section, okay, you'll hear them say things like must have good rental history. Okay, little tip: you need to be objective and measurable. State what you mean by that. All right. So if I was looking for a management company to manage my property, if I was Jim at Jim's and I owned a duplex and I was looking for someone to manage my 8-unit apartment building or duplex, I'd want to hear you say must have a rental history with no late payments within the past 24 months, or no more than 2 late payments within the past 24 months. That's objective and that's measurable. Think like no lease violations, right? Must have been given proper notice to vacate. Okay, those are objective and measurable standards. Okay, having good rental history is not. So that would tell me, if that's what their screening criteria is, they don't know what they're doing. They don't come from that side of the industry. Some of these management companies do actually have people that come from my side of the business, that Toyota side of things, right? And they've branched off and started their own management company, and they've been taught the right way to do things. Those are the ones that you want to be able to spot. You take my classes, and I'm going to teach you all this stuff so that one of two things are going to happen. You're either going to be able to understand all this stuff well enough to be able to say, you know what, I know this stuff now, I can run my properties myself, or you're going to be able to be that guy that can vet management companies well enough because you're going to know how to spot someone who doesn't know what they're doing. All right, so those are some things that taking my courses will allow you to do. So so shameless little plug here. So it's at jppropertyconsulting.com, and it's on-demand classes or on-demand courses. And I've got courses on fair housing, application processing procedures, marketing and leasing tactics, and just general property operations as well. So go check that out. But again, so those are some things out there. So here's another one I hear. Once you learn my application processing procedures class, okay, you're going to be able to know all the steps that you should be taking to process an applicant. Okay. Now, so what I mean by that is there's a lot more to this than just simply running their credit report and looking at the score. Okay. So here's one of the things what I would ask them. I would ask that management company. So give me an understanding of somebody turns in an application. What's your steps that you're taking to process this application? What are you doing to make sure this person meets your screening criteria? Now you've told me what your criteria is. How are you going to make sure this person? Now they say, well, now here's some red flags. Okay, these are some red flags that I would hear and say, okay, I'm not going to hire these guys. If they say something like, we call your landlord, okay, or we would call and talk to your employer. So we're going to call your landlord and we're going to ask him some questions. And we call your previous landlord. Okay. Here's one of the things they teach us over at the Toyota side of things. Okay. All right. When it comes to fair housing, let's give an example. So let's say somebody thinks that, and they're part of a protected class, and they have this impression that they think that you're kind of digging into their application more than you would, let's say, Grandma Ethel's application, right? And they think that you're just being real overly picky and really stringent with their processing of their application. And they make a fair housing complaint on you. The defense of, no, I swear to God, I do the same thing with every applicant, is not going to fly. So how do they make things good over at the Toyota side of things? They teach us, you do the entire process from start to finish with the application process in writing. That means that you don't just call their landlord. You're going to have a form that you're going to send to the landlord, okay? Whether you scan and email it to them, you fax it to them, you mail it to them, whatever. You're going to send that to that landlord, okay? And they're going to answer these questions. That does a couple things. One is it makes sure that you're consistent in asking the same questions with every applicant. You don't want to all of a sudden have a different applicant where you're starting to dig into and ask this applicant's questions for this landlord, more questions than you would Grandma Ethel, because that's going to get you into trouble. You want to be able to prove that you're doing the same thing with every applicant. So that means that when you are doing the landlord verifications, they should be doing everything in writing, not just calling the landlord. You want to make sure that so when they tell you that we call their landlord, okay, no. I want to hear you're sending them a form and you're doing this all in writing, so you have documentation showing that you do the same thing with every applicant, so that if we ever get a fair housing complaint, you have backup showing this, right? So that's important. That's a business practice that we do over at the big side of this industry, the big companies, okay? The same thing is true with the landlord verification. What we do is we run the credit report, and just a little tidbit of information, we Google the addresses that come up on that credit report. Okay, so if they're telling you, well, we run the credit report, right, and we look to make sure they have a credit score of 650. Oh, well, aren't you great? Okay, we look to make sure they don't have any debts or any outstanding whatever, or this and that. Well, aren't you great? Well, here's what just happened. You're not looking at those addresses that come up on the credit report and their previous addresses. We copy and paste those into the browser, right, and look them up, okay, and make sure that they don't come up as a management company. Or we contact the city assessors as well and verify ownership of not just the addresses on their applications, but the owner's of everything that comes up on their credit report. That way, and then we look at their aliases on their credit report, making sure that their aliases aren't the same last name. Maybe they have a maiden name that comes up with the same last name as their landlord that they're trying to tell you to call on their application. Well, that's Uncle Joe then, right? Okay. Well, we're not going to use that as a landlord verification because we just discovered that by doing some of this digging, right? If these management companies are telling you, well, we run the credit report and we look at the score and we make sure that they don't have any judgments against them, and they kind of leave it at that, they're not digging into these applications as well as they teach us how to do over at the big side of the companies, right? And thus, you're getting stuck with some of these undesirables because they're not vetting them as thoroughly. Now that's just a couple things. There's a whole bunch of stuff we look at on the credit report that I go through in my application screening class that I teach you over on my website. But that's just a couple things right there. And once you go through my classes, you're going to understand the things that they ought to be doing and they ought to be running on when they run a credit report, the things that they should be looking at. One thing is that I'll tell you is that I'm not a big fan of some of these application screening companies, these third-party providers out there, AppFolio or RentPrep or anything like that, that run the applications for them. It's kind of taken all the heavy lifting off of them for them, and then they still charge the application a fee that maybe your state doesn't allow them to do so. But again, a lot of those processing companies don't go through the extensive steps that we do at the big companies and that I teach you guys how to do on my website. That And if they're not doing that, because if they're telling you they're using AppFolio or RentPrep or one of these other application screening companies out there, I guarantee you they're not doing this. They're not doing all these extensive steps to process these applications, okay? Because those companies won't do that. They will do the basics of running the credit report and looking at the score and make sure they're paying Visa and MasterCard on time. And there's a lot more to look at on that credit report than just that. So that's some of the things there. So those are red flags to me that I would see that if they're doing that, that would show me this is not someone that comes from that side of the business and has that training. Another thing, so we talked about that making sure that they don't say good rental history or good credit rating. You need to spell out what that is, right? So asking to see their screening criteria, looking at some of these things. Once you've taken my classes and you've gone through, my fair housing class and my application screening class and so in my application processing class, you're going to be able to, as a pro, look at these management companies' ads and see whether or not, just even by looking at their ads, whether or not they know what they're doing or not. So I give you those tools to be able to assess property management companies properly, because you're now going to learn the stuff that we learn over at that Toyota side of things, and thus you're going to be able to assess the Bob's Auto Sales guys, whether they know what they're doing or not. Or I'm going to teach you you're going to learn enough to be able to kind of do this on your own, possibly, and not have to spend the management company fees, if you will. So go check out my website, jppropertyconsulting.com, and take a look at my on-demand classes that I have. They're very affordable, and I've even got a bundle package that if you purchase all 4 of my classes, there's a discounted price. Each one of my classes comes with downloadable forms that pertain to each class. So for example, I have a class on just property operations, which is kind of like once they move in and everything from, it's called move-in day and beyond. So it's everything from their move-in day and after and property operations things. An example of that is downloadable forms I have in there is we have, one of the things we do at the big companies, we have what's called preventative maintenance checklists that we do for every season. So I've got on there a fall preventative maintenance checklist, one for spring, one for summer, one for winter, and so on. And you can edit them to pertain to your particular property itself. That's just an example of things. I've got a market study template that you can download and use to punch in properties that are nearby you and properly assess those properties so you can come up with a proper dollar amount for you to charge for your rent based on what your competition's doing around the area, so you can accurately compare your property to someone down the road. And it's kind of an Excel worksheet that gives you the ability to kind of look at things very clearly on that. And that's in my marketing and advertising class. So the marketing and leasing class. So every class comes with these downloadable forms, and it comes with a textbook, if you will. I will show you. This is a textbook that I have, and in here there's forms and documents and pages and stuff of things that we use in here and stuff. And every class comes with this textbook here that I have, and you can download and print out and go and refer back to as many times as you need to. So again, go check that out, jppropertyconsulting.com. I hope this was helpful to you. I'm going to have probably another sequel to this one as well too, so please like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos in the future. So I just started my YouTube channel recently, so I've got a lot more coming up, and I'm going to be doing little taste tests and little snacks of some of the training and education that I give, little snippets of things that I do in my online classes, just to give you guys a little bit taste of what I do. So go like and subscribe to my channel, and go check out my website at jppropertyconsulting.com. If you want to get a little bit of understanding of who I am and where I come from and my background, I'm on LinkedIn. You can check out my LinkedIn page at Jim Puccio, Puccio, comma, ARM, comma, CAM, which is accredited residential manager through the Institute of Real Estate Management, and certified apartment manager through the National Apartment Association. And you can read about my decades of working at the large management organizations and where I'm coming from. So again, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was really helpful to you.